Hi Ben, I'm Alex. I'm one of the midwives here at the SAN. I'm here today to talk to you about routines postnatally after the birth of your child. Congratulations on becoming a father. Did you have any questions for me?
Thanks, Alex. My first question is, what happens after the baby arrives?
Well, initially after the baby's first born, the midwife will go through a series of checks. They'll check your baby from head to toe and do a full assessment of your child, at which time as well the baby's measured and weighed, and injections like vitamin K and Hep B are administered, which you'll discuss with your obstetrician about close to the time of delivery. The checks will differ depending on the type of delivery, whether it's a normal vaginal delivery or a cesarean section. For a normal vaginal delivery, you'll find that the obstetrician and or midwife are pushing firm on your partner's stomach quite frequently, which is to contract the fundus, which is the muscle at the top of the uterus that contracts during labour and then again after birth to help reduce the uterus back into the pelvis and reduce bleeding. If your baby is born via cesarean section, generally what happens is the midwife and yourself with your child will go out to recovery shortly before your partner arrives in recovery, at which time those checks and measurements and injections will happen then. After that, your partner will be offered to do skin to skin with your baby before breastfeeding is commenced in recovery. After the initial checks are done, if any concerns were identified by your midwife, obstetrician or paediatrician, your baby may be taken to special care nursery for closer observation or treatment, which will be discussed with you and your partner before this happens. After all the checks and assessments are done and some breastfeeding or feeding your baby has happened, the midwife will assist your partner to get up and have a shower or have a wash, depending on the interventions that are used during labour, at which time then you will be brought to the postnatal ward.
Now on the ward, how do we establish a feeding and sleeping routine?
Unfortunately, babies aren't very good initially at routine. They can't tell the time, they don't know what to do. So the first part is unfortunately leads you into a false sense of security where babies are quite sleepy in the first 24 to 48 hours. They sleep, they cry, they poo, and they do it all again. So your baby is constantly learning over the first few days and over the first few years of its life, but especially in that first 24 to 48 hours, you'll notice differences in its poo, and that's due to the breast milk changing in the first 2 to 3 days. Your baby is now learning new sounds and hearing new sounds, seeing different lights and shapes. So it will tend to be sleepy for the first few days, and these routines can change from hour to hour where all of a sudden your baby is awake and active and crying and then sleeping for longer periods of times, and this will differ and no baby is the same.
What can we expect during our stay on the postnatal ward?
On the postnatal ward, we try as hard as we can to give you somewhat of a regular routine with regular meals, tea and coffee rounds, medication rounds. After a cesarean section, you can tend to stay on the ward a day or two longer than a vaginal delivery, more due to the recovery process after having a cesarean section. While you're on the ward, there's numerous postnatal classes for you to attend. There's a breastfeeding class every day, which is often run by a lactation consultant, which will give yourself and your partner the opportunity to ask questions about breastfeeding. Any issues that may arise during your stay, the lactation consultant can schedule to come and see you in your room at a later time and discuss those individual issues that you may have with breastfeeding. We also try and encourage the father or the partner to go along to these breastfeeding classes as well. More so because after you discharge and get home, it is beneficial to have someone else there at 2 o'clock in the morning when mum's really tired and doesn't know what's going on with the baby, to maybe suggest something that you remember hearing in the breastfeeding class to help her out. Also, while you're on the ward, there's a Ready to Go Home class, which talks to you about everything from Medicare registration, fitting a baby seat in your car, things you may require when you get home, your early childhood centres and people that you can contact and for help and support when you leave the hospital. There's also a baby settling class or a calming class that's held on the ward, which will give you tips and techniques on wrapping your baby, swaddling your baby, and what you can do to help make your life at home a little bit easier. There's also a physiotherapy class that's held on the ward that is particularly beneficial for women that have had cesarean sections, but also for vaginal delivery as well. It discusses exercises postnatally, the amount of exercise that you should be doing when you get home, and what's good for your body to help recovery after the delivery of your child. There's also a bathing demonstration class which is held every day as well. This is provided on the ward in our Well Baby nursery and is demonstrated by one of the midwives, and we also always need a demonstration baby to wash, and we try and get the dads involved because it is a good bonding exercise for dads to do. There's also a newly introduced fathers program that it will be held on the ward, as well as correspondence via email as well for dads that can't be present on the ward. This is to help dads transition into becoming a new father because the challenges are there for dads as well as giving them tips and techniques on what to do when they're, at home with their baby.